Ukraine is being partitioned. The question was, what will happen to Ukraine? Today, Europeans talk elegantly about security guarantees, but security guarantees actually mean the partition of Ukraine. A Russian zone has already been created, which covers about 20% of Ukraine. What is being debated is how many kilometers from the border of the Russian zone a demilitarized zone should be created. 40 kilometers, 50, 100, 200. We don't know yet. This is happening now. We have been told that, first of all, the Russian president will remain in his post. I'd like to remind everyone that at the beginning of the war, an American president called Biden, who you may remember, went down to Warsaw and made a speech. I'm going to say it in English or authenticity, but it sounded like Putin is now afraid, which means Putin must fail. It will not be defeated, or it will be defeated in war. The Americans have openly announced that they want to create another political regime in Russia. This has led to the situation we are in now, where the European Union is financing the war, and Russia is financing the war. There is a funding race between us, and at the moment, the Russians are winning. This situation weakens them, and we get bogged down. Ukraine is being partitioned. The question was, what will happen to Ukraine? We talked about this a year ago. Today, if we look at what is happening and understand with a cool head what is happening there, we have to say that Ukraine is being divided right now. Before the war, Ukraine had a very clear situation. It existed as a buffer state with 50% Russian influence and 50% Western influence. This was sometimes a matter of debate. Such a government came in, so to speak, but no one questioned that Ukraine is a territory between the West and Russia. A buffer zone is a buffer state, and everyone is safe if the Russians have roughly 50% influence, and the Westerners have roughly 50% influence. This was the situation until the war. This was disrupted by the war. How did it happen? It could be the subject of another lecture. The point is that it has been disrupted. Today, Europeans talk elegantly about security guarantees, but security guarantees actually mean the partition of Ukraine. The first step has already been taken, because the West has accepted that there is a Russian zone. The only debate is whether, beyond Crimea, it is 2 counties, 4 counties, 5 counties, or 6 counties, but there is no question of it not existing. A Russian zone has already been created, which covers about 20% of Ukraine. That's in the past. There's not much debate about that anymore. What is being debated is how many kilometers from the border of the Russian zone a demilitarized zone should be created. 40 kilometers, 50, 100, 200. We don't know yet. This is happening now. This will be the second zone. The result of the partition of Ukraine is a Russian zone, a demilitarized zone, and finally a Western zone, the contours and status of which we cannot say anything for sure at this stage, but we can see that Ukraine is being transformed into a 3-zone area. The bosses of the European Union think that their collective indebtedness is for sale to all, at least in Western Europe, the easiest to sell. It is an acceptable goal to be in debt. On a huge scale, this is a Ukrainian war itself, our security. They want to use this to create massive debt for all of us. According to us Hungarians, I think it definitely is. This is a mistake, because Ukraine's membership of the European Union is the inevitable consequence of the indebtedness it shares. Because we let the Ukrainians in, We have no money. To bring Ukrainians up to the EU average, we need to borrow. So they think that Ukrainian membership, the war, and Ukrainian membership create a common debt. But in fact, Ukrainian membership is plunging the European Union into war. Because we cannot imagine that the European Union has member states, and one of them is attacked from outside or gets involved in a border conflict with it, as is the case now on the Russian-Ukrainian border. In such a situation, it is impossible that other EU member states do not rush to the aid of someone who is under military attack. But whether Ukraine is under this military attack or whether Ukraine is in conflict with Russia, it will never be decided by Ukraine but always by Russia, and we are already in a war. So I think the Europeans are wrong. Ukraine's membership of the European Union means, directly or indirectly, that we will be dragged into war, and we don't have any money. I've just given you the figures on how the performance of the Union has declined. We don't even have enough money to restore our own competitiveness. And then we want to take the money we have to Ukraine. So we are also destroying the European Union economically. Europe should not really be shaking hands in Washington, but should go to Moscow and conclude an EU-Russia security agreement, not just on Ukraine, but an EU-Russia security agreement, which obviously includes the possibility that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO or the European Union, but it can be included. And I think that Hungary could support a strategic cooperation agreement between Ukraine and the European Union. We do not want to push the Ukrainians into the void. We are not anti-Ukrainian.
Ez Ukrajna körülbelül 20%-át